How are you bringing families into your conversations about student data? Hi, my name is Lauren Milam, and I'm a design principal at Education Elements. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you a framework you can use in planning to engage students' families in conversations around data: access, understand, and action. This video will speak specifically to the promotes equity and inclusion aspect of the essential elements of data culture framework. Specifically, we're going to focus in on the way in which you distribute data across the community, especially thinking about those who have been historically disenfranchised or disengaged from the conversations around data. And this is because it'll promote transparency, enable all stakeholders to take a seat at the table, and ensure that those at the table have equal power. Let me start by telling you a quick story. Recently, I had to find a new pediatrician for my young son. After his initial visit, the nurse at checkout told us that all of his records would be available in the patient portal. I didn't need any of his records at the time, so I didn't make much of it and figured that'll be really handy when it comes time to use it. But a few weeks later, my son came home from school with what I like to call the daycare crud. And given the pandemic and everything going on, out of an abundance of caution, I kept him home and called our pediatrician. Through the telehealth visit, the pediatrician said he probably had an ear infection, but an ear infection can result from COVID and all the congestion and coughing. So he recommended we go get a COVID test, which my toddler son loathed. As we were driving away from the testing site, the technician said once again, the results will be available in your patient portal. I was like, oh crap, I don't actually know where that is. I haven't logged into the patient portal yet, but I'm sure I can figure it out, right? So I get home and I look through the 12 pamphlets that they gave me at the testing site. A lot of helpful information about the testing process, but no link to the patient portal. I look in my email where I had the confirmation for both his initial visit and the testing appointment. No link to a patient portal. So I go to the pediatrician's website. Still no patient portal. At this point, I am frankly exhausted and home with a sick kid while trying to work full time. So I honestly gave up. I figured my kid is home until Monday at least, so I'll figure it out over the weekend when I have more time. And they had mentioned they'd call if he was positive for contact tracing anyway, so I figured I'll know one way or another. But to go back to daycare, I needed the proof that he was negative. So on Monday morning, I called the pediatrician just to confirm. It was high stakes, I didn't want to spread the disease if that's what it was, and he was all fine, it was all good. But it took me many hours and many efforts to figure out the results that I needed, and I still never found that patient portal. Now, my experience is not dissimilar from that of parents or family members supporting their students. They may hear through Meet the Teacher Night or back to school paperwork that there is a parent portal that they can log into to access their students' data, but that doesn't mean that they know how to access it, and it surely doesn't mean that they know how to best support their learner based on what they see. I have seen scattershot family engagement strategies in many places. You might have a back to school night that's really geared towards building initial relationships. You might have parent-teacher conferences that vary in structure and style from teacher to teacher, let alone from school to school. But I wonder, what would happen if we were thoughtful and purposeful about the ways in which we engaged our families in conversations about student data, so that those conversations went beyond getting to know you or basic niceties, and instead were what Judith Warren Little called learning-rich conversations for everyone. You may be thinking, Lauren, that's all well and good, but how on earth am I supposed to do that? No worries, there's a research-based framework that you can use to plan your efforts for family engagement around data conversations: access, understand, and action. Families care deeply about how their child or student is doing in school. Giving them access to the data can help them better support their learner and make them feel more connected to their school. When I hear teachers and educators talking about how parents don't even care right now, I find myself wondering, is it that they don't care or that they don't know? The challenge now is not necessarily making sure that families have access to online platforms. We troubleshot a lot of that in the early days of the pandemic. Instead, now the challenge is whether parents and families know that they have the access that they need. Here are some strategies that you may employ to increase access in your community. Consider using early touch points in the school year, not just to tell families that there is an online portal, but to show them how to access it and get them engaged right away. For example, consider having family members sit down with their student and fill out a learner profile that helps you get to know your students and also gets parents engaged in the online portal right away. Understand. Once families have access to the data, that doesn't mean that they necessarily know what to do. To help your families in supporting their students' learning, you need to make sure that they understand the data in the context of their students' short and long-term successes. If the data in the dashboard is complicated, convoluted, or requires a special training to understand, you might ask yourself if the data is truly accessible. Here are 3 strategies you can employ to support families as they access and use their students' data. The first strategy is to add a little context. Ask yourself if the numbers make sense standing alone. If not, you might consider adding some help text so that parents know what it is that they're looking at. Take, for example, attendance. If I know that my child's missed 3 days, but I don't know that day 4 is when he or she is technically considered truant, I might not have any cause for concern. But adding a small sentence right under the data that explains the district's truancy or attendance policy would go a long way in helping me better support my child through the year. Second, be consistent. If data is only updated at the very end of the quarter or the semester, family members are going to figure that out and they're going to stop checking it because they may as well wait for the report card. Third, be explicit. Provide parents and family members explicit training on how to access the dashboard and what they should be looking at. This could take place through a community training or during the first parent-teacher conference night where the teachers would log in with the parents and show them exactly what they're looking at. Last but not least is action. The ultimate goal of involving family members in data conversations is to produce a long-lasting change in student learning. You can only do this if family members access, understand, and then are able to act on this data in the dashboard. Here are 2 strategies you might employ in order to help your family members in your community support their learners. The first is to consider adding some context about what you know best about the learners. That is their strengths and areas for growth, their passions and interests. Adding this type of information can serve as a push-off point for conversations between family members and students that will ultimately allow them to better support their students' learning needs. The second would be to link resources, activities, great websites, and information that you find helpful in the dashboard itself, so that if as a parent or family member, I see that my student has a need in math, specifically 3rd grade fractions, let's say, I'm able to click right in there to the Khan Academy link, log in, and access some practice problems that I can use to support my learner right then and there. With access to data, an understanding of what's in the data dashboard, and a clear and compelling understanding of how to use the data, parents and family members can actively engage with teachers and other educators to actually support their learners in a way that complements what's happening in school. They can provide helpful support as students transition from one grade or one school to the next. They can make sure that the resources and support that are going into supporting their student are aligned with the student's long-term goals, and they can actively engage in the conversation about the needs of the community, the needs of the school, and the decisions that are being made on behalf of the student. Now, if you'll remember, this video started out talking about the promotes equity and inclusion element of the essential elements of data culture. I encourage you to think about the following question. In what ways might rethinking family engagement strategies to be more coherent and connected to data practices promote equity and inclusion? What are the potential pitfalls you want to avoid? As a recap, today we talked a 3-point strategy you can use to increase community and family engagement in student data conversations: access, understand, and action. Thanks so much for watching. If you like the content in this video, be sure to follow us on Twitter or visit our website. And if you like this video in particular, be sure to like this video or subscribe to our YouTube channel.